Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Dunlap, and I'm a technology consultant at RSA, the security division of EMC. Today, I'm going to be talking about RSA data loss prevention. I'll be starting out with an introduction to DLP, and I'll finish off with a few different common business use cases. This is just one part of our live webcast series. Every Tuesday, we cover DLP, and we also have similar webcasts on our Secure ID solution on Thursday, and our Envision SIM offering on Wednesday. And times for these other presentations are also 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This call is in presentation only mode, so all attendees are muted on the audio conference, but if you do have questions, please use the Q&A button in live meeting. And I also recommend that you view your live meeting in full screen. You can do that by clicking on the button on the bottom right-hand corner of your page. So with that said, let me go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start by talking about some data security challenges we face, what DLP is in general, as well as RSA's unique approach to data loss prevention. And then I'll finish things off by talking about how to make a DLP solution successful, and how we at RSA can help you in your education and evaluation process. So think of today's demo as a taste of what DLP has to offer. And if you'd like to see a more detailed discussion, or you'd like to see a more customized demo, please reach out to your local sales rep. And if you're not sure who they are, you can ask that as a question in the Q&A field, and I can point you in the right direction. So what is data loss or data leakage, and what sort of impact does it have on businesses? So most organizations today have some kind of sensitive data that must be protected. And when this sensitive information leaves your company and it escapes your control, it can have a very serious impact in a variety of ways. This can lead to reduced security, it can result in increased financial costs, legal action, and most importantly, loss of customer trust. So what DLP does with this sensitive data is put controls in place that will stop that unintentional information loss and also eliminate the associated risks. So one of the first questions that comes up with data loss prevention is, where is your data? This is one of the biggest challenges of managing data. In most cases, you're going to start with a well-defined infrastructure, kind of like what you see here. And you can point to where your important information is supposed to live, but take note of that word supposed. In most cases, it doesn't stay quite that simple. And that's because as information flows in day-to-day work, it transforms, it expands, and it's constantly moving around the organization. So even if you do have important information in a secure database, parts of it are usually copied around the organization. They may be printed. They also may be accessed on different endpoints. And this whole idea is called data sprawl. The good thing about data sprawl is that most of this movement is individuals that are just doing their everyday jobs. They're not malicious users. They may be an uneducated user, but the important thing is that they're just trying to conduct business. So layered on top of this data sprawl are the policies and regulations that we have to deal with. Some of these may be governmental, some of them could be legal, some are industry driven, and some are specific to our companies. So what does DLP do with these policies and regulations? Well, what we do is take all of these regulations, all of these policies, and then we hunt down the applicable information no matter where it lies. So by finding this information, you can then begin to manage it effectively and also apply the appropriate controls. So you always will be finding your information risks and managing them with RSA DLP. So where does DLP work? So data loss prevention typically handles information in the three major forms that you see here. We have data at rest, data in motion, and data in use. So data at rest is information that is sitting on a disk somewhere, whether it be on a file server, on a workstation, or another repository in your organization. Data in motion, on the other hand, is information that is moving outside of the organization, data that's moving on the inside, or data that's moving internally between employees. Examples of this are email and file transfers. And lastly, data in use is information as it's opened and used by various programs in the organization, whether it be a Excel spreadsheet or a word processing document. So now let's look at each of these categories and see how RSA DLP approaches them. The first of these that I'll talk about is data at rest. So with data at rest, DLP can identify and control data on your file shares, on your servers, on your laptops, workstations, as well as your repositories and databases. And as you can see here, we support up to 300 different file types, actually more than 300 different file types. For data in motion, DLP can control and identify data such as email, instant messages, and web traffic. And again, the most concerns that most companies have nowadays are email and web. For data in use, RSA DLP will let you audit files that are printed, burned to a CD, or copied to USB storage devices, such as a thumb drive or any other external storage. And we can also quarantine data in use as well. And you can imagine that to handle all of these different file types and different kinds of information in their different forms, that we'd have to employ some numerous approaches and some very sophisticated technology. So with that said, I now want to get into the key infrastructure components of the DLP solution. And the first of those is DLP Data Center. So DLP Data Center specifically deals with data at rest. So again, this is information on file servers, on large repositories, and what Data Center enables you to do is scan these repositories with agents and also with grid workers. So what is a grid worker? A grid worker is an extra workstation that you could have lying around. It could be a Windows box, and you could use this to add more processing power when you're performing a scan on a large repository in your organization. Next up we have the RSA DLP Endpoint Discover. So Endpoint Discover deals with data at rest also, but in this case it's dealing with them on employee desktops, on laptops, and this method also uses agents to find and manage sensitive information. And one important thing to make note of is that DLP is always working whether an endpoint is disconnected or connected from the network. So in the event that an endpoint does disconnect and then it reconnects, it will update the heart of DLP with the appropriate information. And I'll be getting into that a little bit later. So the next key infrastructure component of the solution is RSA DLP Network. So DLP Network handles data in motion using highly specialized appliances that can be put at key egress points in your infrastructure. And although DLP does handle numerous protocols, the largest concerns for most companies are email and web traffic. And DLP Network will allow you to both block, quarantine, and also let you self-release data in motion. If you have a sensitive email and you do have permission to send it out from your manager or from another higher up, you could go ahead and self-release and also get a message which will give you immediate feedback on your violation. So next we have DLP Endpoint Enforce. So Endpoint Enforce handles data in use on multiple endpoints in your organization, and it will allow you to block, justify, audit, and provide immediate feedback to users when they violate a corporate policy. And the important thing to note about that is that you can customize the message that they'll see when they do violate one of your data security policies, so you can constantly educate your employees so they're not making the same mistakes twice, so they can always do their jobs more efficiently. So you may have noticed that at the center of each architecture diagram was a component called Enterprise Manager. Enterprise Manager is the heart of the RSA DLP suite, and it's a key to our unique approach. And that's not only because it provides the main user interface to the solution, but it's also where you'll do all of your policy management. For example, you can leverage pre-built policies. We have over 100 policy templates built into the solution, and you can also build and customize your own. And we also provide a dashboard and various reporting tools that will let you monitor and track your DLP effort. Another important thing to note about Enterprise Manager is that it's where you'll define the workflow for your incidents. So you can manage them as they happen, and you can also initiate remediation as part of your workflow. And lastly, Enterprise Manager is where administrators with sufficient privileges can manage the key different infrastructure components of DLP. So built around Enterprise Manager are the components that I discussed earlier. All of these can detect and remediate in a variety of ways, and you'll see later on in the live demonstration and in our use cases today that based upon the policies from Enterprise Manager, you can do things like prevent a user from copying certain types of data to a USB memory stick. You can also quarantine email that violates your corporate data handling rules, and you also have the option to encrypt any sensitive outgoing messages that are detected by DLP. So another thing we like to stress with the DLP suite is extend and integrate. One of the most powerful features of the solutions is the integrations it has with complementary technologies such as digital rights management solutions like Microsoft RMS, and also RSA's own SIM solution, RSA Envision. So now that we've discussed the basic ideas and features of DLP, I want to go ahead and take a look at the solution itself. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to my desktop environment. Okay, so what we see here is the login screen for DLP Enterprise Manager. Again, this is the main web UI for the solution. This is where you'll do all of your policy management. I'm going to log in as a user by the name of C. Garrison, and this is going to tie into our use case in a few minutes. But first of all, let me go over the web interface. So when you first log in, you'll see this front-end screen. You'll see this dashboard. You'll see an overall dashboard on the health of your environment. You'll see incidents divided by the 3 different key infrastructure components of the solution. So if we look here, we can see we currently have 48 incidents for DLP network. We have 29 for endpoint and 142 for data center. And we can also customize the view. Right now we're looking at incidents that happened in the last 3 months for all products. And when it says products here, it's actually referring to the infrastructure components. If I scroll a little further, we'll see some graphs and other dashboards that will show us things like incidents by product. We'll see various risk trends, and we can also see the incidents by our top 5 policies. And if I scroll a little further, we'll see we also have saved incident searches. We have some quick links so you can quickly get to various incident types, whether it's all of your open incidents or it's all of your incidents for a specific group in your organization. So what I want to do now is take a look at the policy configuration in Enterprise Manager. So you'll notice that we do use a tabbed interface. If you're familiar with browsing the web today, most likely you've used some kind of tabbed interface and you know how easy it is to navigate an interface like this. So let me go ahead and take a look at the Policies tab. So that brings us to our Policy Manager screen. And this is where we can manage all of our active policies, and we can see all of the policies that are currently enabled for our DLP deployment. So we can see things like key employee info. We can see we have the payment card industry data security standard enabled as well. And we also have a policy template library that we can build policies from. And we have over 100 policy templates. If I go to this policy submenu here, I can go to the policy template library. And you'll see we have all of the policies organized by category. We can see regulatory compliance here at the top. If I expand this, I can see various regulatory policies. Some of these are probably familiar to a lot of you. Things like GLBA, HIPAA, NASD, ITAR. We have Sarbanes-Oxley. The list goes on. But today I'm actually going to drill down into PCI DSS, as this is going to relate to the use cases that I'm going to go through today. So I'll take a look at PCI DSS, go ahead and drill down. We'll see that brings us to the policy configuration screen. So at the top we can see a brief description of our policy. We can see that it's currently enabled by this radio button right here. And if I look below that, we can see the infrastructure components that it's currently enabled for. So we can see that we have unique icons for network, data center, and endpoint. If I scroll a little further, we see content blades and the event severity scale. So let me pause for a second now and talk about the different methods that we use to identify sensitive data with DLP. The first method that we use is called fingerprinting. So fingerprinting is a process of giving each sensitive document a unique digital signature. So in this case, we don't have to worry about storing an entire document in the DLP repository once it's detected, because that's just going to cause more data sprawl for our organization. And the other method that we use is called described content. So this is a method where we analyze every single document using methods like regular expressions, entities, and also proximities and weights. For example, for this PCI DSS policy, we have a couple different content blades. And a content blade is a expert data analysis template that uses both the fingerprinting method and the described content method. So in the case of PCI DSS, we'll see we have a credit card track data content blade and a credit card number content blade. So this will have everything it needs to identify the different formats that credit cards can come in from the various issuers out there. If I look beyond content blades, we'll see we have this event severity scale. And you'll see we have 5 different levels on the scale, from the ignore level all the way up to critical. We can actually change the range of each of these levels on the scale by dragging these bars on this graph here. And you can see we can determine the severity by risk factor or count. If we're talking about count, I can give you a quick example. If we were talking about a document that contains credit card accounts, obviously a document that contains 5 accounts is going to be a lower severity level than one that contains 200. I'll show you an example of that in one of our use cases today. So below the event severity scale, we can see we have configuration for policy violation rules. So you can configure how rules are handled. You can choose what action will be taken of incidents for specific severity levels. For example, right now we're on the DLP network tab. And if I wanted to configure endpoint, all I have to do is click on the endpoint tab or data center, and I can set up the specific policy violation rules for these other components. But now if I go back to network, we can see currently we are auditing pretty much everything. So we can see we're detecting all of these protocols when it pertains to data in motion. We can see that we're going to audit everything. So it says greater than or equal to any severity level. So let's go ahead and change that. If I change that to high, we're now going to audit everything that's greater than or equal to the high level on the severity scale. But if I switch that to block and audit, we're going to take a different action. So we can keep adding different details to our policy violation rules. Let's say for our medium documents, I wanted to audit only. So I can change this any here to medium. So now we have different ways to handle data in motion with DLP network. So that's just a quick example of how policy violation rules can be set up. If I look below that, we see incident handling rules. So this is where you can assign an incident to a specific person, whether it be your admin, whether it be a specific group in your company. We could select a group like our compliance officers for corporate and HR. You could also select someone from Active Directory as well. So if you look at our ldap.corporate.com directory, we could choose someone from here as well. But for this example, I'm not going to go ahead and choose that. I'm going to leave that at the default. I just want to give you an idea of what it looks like to configure various components of a policy. So below this, we have notification rules. So this is where we can notify the sender of an email, in the case of DLP network, that they violated a policy. So if I wanted to notify the sender, I could click on this checkbox here, and we can also set the incident severity level that will notify them on. So let's say if it's of the, let's say, high level, greater than or equal to the high level on the scale, we'll notify the sender. And let's say we also want to notify the sender's manager. We can do that as well. And if you look at this section here, quarantined and blocked email notifications, you'll see that we can enable the self-release of quarantine emails. We can also notify the sender if an email is quarantined for a specific amount of time. So you can see by default we have this enabled self-release of quarantine emails, so the user can self-release an email if they do have the proper permissions, if they have approval from their manager, or if someone else has approved it for a one-time exception. So that's the policy configuration screen in a nutshell. I now want to get into our first use case of the day. So now if I click on the dashboard, go back to the front-end screen of Enterprise Manager, I can see that I currently have 142 data center incidents. So for this use case, I'm going to jump into the shoes of a data center administrator by the name of C. Garrison. So we logged in as C. Garrison earlier. We did a scan earlier on our departmental file share, and we noticed that we had a lot of data sprawl. We had just a ton of incidents pop up today, and I can drill down into these incidents by clicking on the data center portion of this pie chart here. So if I click on this, it brings us to our incidents tab. And here we can see all of the incidents that are a result of our scan. We can see various incidents of different severity levels with different policy violations. Let's actually look at one that's a PCI DSS violation. If we look at number 373 right here, we can see that this is on the high level on the severity scale. We can see it's currently open. We can see the sender, user, or owner of the file. And then we can also see the policy violated. And we can see the action that was taken. So we can see that this was audited. And if I click on the incident ID in the left column, it will bring us to more details on this particular incident. So we can see this has one event wrapped into it. We can see not only the policy match, but we can also see the content blade that was used to identify the sensitive data. In this case, it was the credit card number content blade. And we can also look at the matched files below here. So when I talk about matched files, I mean multiple events. So in some cases, you may have more than one event wrapped into one incident. So if these are all a PCI DSS policy, they're all by similar users around the same time frame, DLP can wrap these all into one incident to make it easier to manage from an administration point of view. So if I check on this particular event ID and look at this matched file, we can see the contents of the sensitive document. So we can see all of these credit card accounts. And you may be thinking, in some cases, we may not want an administrator seeing this sensitive data. And the important thing about this is that we do have role-based access when it comes to administrating DLP with Enterprise Manager. So if you had an administrator who you wanted to lock out from seeing this matched content, you could do that, and they would just see a blank screen when they click on the event ID. They wouldn't see any of this sensitive data that we see highlighted here. If I go back to the incident screen, we can look at another incident real quick. I just want to show one that does have more than one event wrapped into it. If we look at this policy violation on the top, which is a Japanese confidential information violation, we can see the policy match in the content blade and the action taken just like before. This policy action was also to audit the file and the action. And we can see here we have 4 events or 4 matched files wrapped into this incident. And if I click on one of these, we can see again the matched content. And in this case, we see it's actually in Japanese. So we can see hiragana, katakana, and kanji can all be detected by RSA DLP. So this is not to say that the whole interface of Enterprise Manager could be in Japanese or Chinese and Korean. These are all new languages added in DLP 8.0, but we can detect sensitive data in these languages. So the administration interface is still in English, but you can identify these languages. So we can see here the matched content just like we did before with that PCI DSS violation. So again, this particular use case is just an example of data sprawl. We did a scan on one of our repositories. We got a lot of sensitive information detected, a lot of actions that had policy violations within DLP detected, and a lot of information that's just not where it's supposed to be. So again, that's one of the biggest challenges of data management, dealing with data sprawl. But DLP lets you handle it in an elegant and smooth manner. So that concludes this use case. The next use case I want to get into is going to deal with data in motion. So let me go ahead and switch to a different environment briefly. Okay. So you can see now I'm in a different environment, and in this particular use case, I'm going to be in the shoes of a different employee in our organization. In this case, I'm going to be an intern. My name is Francis Washington. I'm pretty new to the company, so I don't currently have a lot of background in sensitive information and compliance, and I haven't been trained in any of my company's corporate data handling rules. But my dilemma is that I have a report to finish for the finance department tomorrow. It needs to contain PCI data. So I need to find a way to finish this report for tomorrow morning. It's the end of the day, and we actually have a lockout policy for interns where it locks us out of the system after 5 p.m. We don't get any overtime, but it does lock us out, so I can't work on the document in the office late tonight. So I need to find a way to get the data I need home so I can work on this on my home workstation. So I'm going to go ahead and try to send one of the documents home to my home address. So I'm going to send an email to myself at home. We're going to say work for home as the subject of our email. And now I need to take a look at the data that I need for my report. So we can see that I have multiple PCI spreadsheets here, and the one that I really need is this PCI high file. If I open this up, we can see the contents of the document. By looking at it, we can see it looks like it has about 40 or so credit card numbers in it. So that's a pretty high count of credit card numbers. That's a lot of sensitive information. But again, I'm not educated in our corporate policy, so I'm going to try to send this home. I can go ahead and drag the file, attach it to my email, and then I'll go ahead and send this off. So I'm going to go ahead and type a little note. And I'll go ahead and send it. So I send that email out, and I actually notice that I have a DLP policy violation in my inbox that I didn't notice yet. If I click on this, I can see that it looks like one of my emails that I sent earlier in the day was quarantined or blocked by DLP. So I'm thinking, what the heck is DLP? But then I can see below, it says generated by RSA Data Loss Prevention. I can see I have some kind of incident ID, and we can see that the policy violated was the key employee info policy. We can see it fell on the high level on the severity scale. But most importantly, I can see I have a little message here that says click the link to release or discard this message. So we see we have a little link here with the incident ID, and if I click on this link, we'll see that this brings up a browser window. And this window is going to tell us a little bit more about what happened with this policy violation, and it can say this is very important. Please follow the instructions on screen. And it's also going to let me review the contents of my email, so I can see what was attached to my email before, and I actually have the option to self-release this. So let's say that I do have approval from my manager. I needed this for my finance report for the morning, so I do want to go ahead and release the email. And if you look at the bottom here, we can see we have the option to release, and the email will be sent out. We can also encrypt and release the email, so we'll encrypt it and then send it out. And then I have the option to discard it in the case that I don't have approval and I don't want to continue this transmission. But I really do need this document, so I'm going to go ahead and encrypt and release it. So I'll go ahead and do that, and now I'll look back at my inbox, and I can see that I have a new policy violation from that email I sent a moment ago. So this time it's a little bit different. So we can see again our email was quarantined or blocked, but in this case I do not have the option to self-release the email. I can see I do have an incident ID just like before. In this case it was the PCI DSS policy that was violated, but again the way the policy was configured in Enterprise Manager does not enable me to self-release the email. You can do this on a policy by policy basis, so your policy controls for PCI DSS are probably going to be different for your key employee info policy and so on. Another thing I want to show you with talking about data in motion is that we can also detect information in webmail. So let's say that as a last resort we're going to try to send that same PCI high file through our webmail account. So let's go ahead and bring up Francis's Hotmail. We're going to try to send a new message, and I'm going to send this to myself at home again. And I'll select my home email address. I'll type finance report as my subject. But I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. I'm not going to attach the document. What I'm going to do is actually open the spreadsheet. So open this PCI high file again. And I'm going to click Control A and select the entire document, the entire contents of our spreadsheet. Go ahead and copy that. And now I'm going to actually paste it into the body of the email. So I can see I have the entire spreadsheet in this email now, and I'm thinking, okay, now I can get my data. I couldn't attach an email earlier with my company account, but I'm going to try to use my Hotmail and try to send the contents of the spreadsheet so I can still work on it tonight. So I'll click on send, and again, I get a policy violation notification. So in this case, it's showing me that I had an email that contained sensitive data. It's been audited for further review. But the important thing about this is that it's also educating Francis on what's going on, as it gives a link to the company's corporate security policy. If I click on this, we can see we have a company intranet site set up that linked from the DLP incident, and it talks about not only our data loss prevention effort, but also talks about our general data policy. It also will educate the user on types of data and appropriate handling for it. And it also will tell us about certain important policies for our company, like PII, PCI, and other important sensitive information that needs to be handled in a specific manner. So again, we really like to stress that we want to educate the user with DLP as well as remediating incidents that pertain to sensitive data. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and I'm going to get into one last use case, but it's still going to involve our friend, Francis Washington. But in this case, I couldn't send the document that I need for my report home, and as a last resort, I'm going to try to copy it to a remote folder that I can access when I'm on the VPN. So if I try to copy these documents here, we're going to see some different results. So again, we have PCI documents here. They're all of different severity levels. We looked at the high file, and that had about 40 credit card numbers in it. If I look at the low file, we'll see this one only contains 1. The high file contained about 40. And if I try to open the critical file, we can see this one contains around, let's see, this one actually has around 200, more than 200 credit card accounts in here. So that's a very sensitive document. But I need all of these for my report, but most importantly, I need this PCI high file. If I don't have the others, it's not a big deal. So if I start copying these to the remote folder, I can see it seems to let me copy this PCI low file, so I'm in good shape. I'm going to try to copy this one too. We also are able to copy this one. However, when I copy this PCI high file to the remote share, we can see we have a very interesting message. So in this case, I have an alert from DLP Endpoint Enforce. It's telling me I'm attempting to violate a corporate policy with the action that I just took, but it's letting me justify my action. So what does that mean? Well, that means that I can still continue with this transmission if I have the proper justification. I could select from these presets here. I could say the data is not confidential, my manager approved this transfer, or I could say this is a one-time exception that's been authorized. But let's say in this use case, my manager did approve the transfer. So I can select that. It's also important to note you could type your own custom justification in this text box here. But right now I'm going to say my manager approved the transfer. I'm going to click on continue. So it lets me copy that PCI high file. So now I can finish my report. The data was not just blocked outright, so I can still be productive, do the things I need to do, but also while handling our sensitive data in the proper way. And DLP has educated me a lot just in the few actions I've tried to take today to get this report done. But just for kicks, I'm going to try to copy this PCI critical file. So when I do this, I also get a endpoint enforce alert, but in this case we can see that I do not have the option to justify my action. All I can do is click on close, and DLP blocks the transmission, and I can't copy that file. That had over 200 credit card numbers in it. That's not something you want getting outside of your organization into the wrong hands. So the way we have our policy set up is that it will let us justify a PCI high file when it comes to DLP endpoint, but not for a critical document like the one we just tried to copy. So this concludes the demonstration portion of today's webcast. Again, we talked about data sprawl. We looked at some data center incidents that we got from scanning a departmental file share. We also tried to send sensitive information home. And lastly, we just were handling information poorly by trying to copy it to a remote share. So that's the demonstration portion. Let me switch back to my deck so we can finish things off for today. Okay, so we're back on my deck, and now I want to talk about sustainable success for DLP. So you can see the message here. It's not about technology. It's about your business objectives. So at RSA, we've been doing data loss prevention for quite a few years now. We've been doing it with some of the largest companies out there. And from engaging with them, we've learned how to build a successful and supportable business solution based on the 3 tenets that you see here. Reduce risk, minimize cost, and avoid disruption. So from a business standpoint, DLP brings along the following value. You can reduce risk by proactively locating and controlling your data, And you can also answer key questions like what kind of data can I catch, what can I do about it, and by automating this process, the value of your DLP solution is realized much faster. You also want to always involve the data owners. You want to show fast time to value. And also, of course, you want to minimize cost. Reducing your risk is important, but you don't want to do that at any cost. You want to focus on your people and your infrastructure because both of these are key costs to your organization. And with that said, a DLP solution needs to be carefully analyzed to ensure that it's easy to set up, that it's easy to maintain over the long haul, and also that it allows for remediation on a level which suits your business. And lastly, you want to avoid disruption. So you always want to avoid risk without breaking your business. And this means that you probably should not block all data outright. You want to accelerate the user's actions, let them do their everyday jobs, and just teach them what your corporate policies are. You want to give them that constant feedback, let them know when they violate something. They won't make the mistake again after they've seen that. And you also want to make the controls transparent to the end user. And we really believe at RSA that data loss prevention is as much of a process as it is a solution. So things like notifying your data owners to look at the problem, number one, will train them. It also will negate having to get the security team involved with every incident. And the key thing to take away from this is that a huge part of DLP is about enabling your business to secure your data as opposed to just securing it. We want to enable your business and let users do their everyday jobs. So if you look here, we can see that we have customers in a variety of market segments in the DLP space. And all of these companies have some common traits. They're all regulated externally. They all have high impact business data that's crucial that they protect, whether it be something like source code or a key formula for a product. And they also all have very large data stores and diverse environments. And they are geographically dispersed. So the last thing I want to talk about today is how we at RSA can help you. So as you can see, we have a variety of offerings based on where you are in your own process. So let's say you're still in the information gathering phase, you're looking to build a business case for data loss prevention. So in this case, we can offer a series of scans. We can come in, we can do a discovery project, and we can provide you a report which will show you where your actual risks are. We also offer total cost of ownership analysis. We offer DLP workshops. And if you're already in the planning phase for a DLP project, we can also provide a framework in which to evaluate vendors. We can give you an actual DLP evaluation environment itself. We have a cloud-based environment, so you could actually have a session so you could log in, you could kick the tires, learn how DLP works, and how to configure policies. And you can also get ideas on your specific architecture from us as well. So there's a lot of ways we can help you when it comes to data loss prevention. So please contact your local sales rep if you want to learn more about data loss prevention or if you want to see a more customized demonstration to your particular business use cases. So that's all I had for today. I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you have a great day.